What did someone do to make you hate them like instantly? There was this woman at an old job I had. Now, she wasn't the greatest, but I never really hated her either. She was the type to annoy people verbally in the workplace with rumors and snide comments. She once brought a coworker to tears. She tried to boss people around despite not having any position to do so. She wasn't a manager on the same level as everyone else. She seemed to have a chip on her shoulder towards our manager more so than anyone else in the department. A young relative of our manager got terminally ill. A local charity was set up in the shop to raise money to send her for treatment as it was her only chance. We all chipped in and encouraged others to do the same until one day all the charity boxes disappeared. Turns out this woman had made an accusation to the head office that it was all fake, that the money was just being pocketed by the manager. So to save any legal issues, the company just stopped allowing the money to be raised on the property. They never reached their goal. The manager's relative was only 12. She never got to see another birthday. That's when I hated this woman, and I'll hate her until I can't hate anymore. Well, I hope she found out the real purpose of the charity boxes and that she gets to live with what she's done. No forgiveness, all karma. Story 2. A few years ago, I was having a small party with some friends and extended friends at my house, right? And this random chick who was a friend of a friend of a friend steals my chair. Know what I mean? She sat where I was sitting. I have a pretty large garage about the dimensions of a house, and the party started there. I had laid about 50 plastic party chairs that I rented for the party. Only about 40 or so people came though. So anyway, eventually the party gets led inside my house, and she said she had to leave early, and well, I didn't think much of it. But the next day when the guys came to collect their chairs, one was missing. I was shocked and counted myself, and one was indeed missing, so I had to reimburse them for it. Same day, I went to check the garage security camera, and I eventually saw this woman picking up one of the chairs and trying to fit it into her car for a good, 10 minutes. I told everyone about it. Filthy chair thief. Story 3. Ran down my wife while she was walking our dog. Drives off as people run to help. Drives to a caravan park and tries to park but messes it up. Car rolls against a tree and gets stuck, so he gets out of the car and runs, leaving his girlfriend behind in the passenger seat because she's in the middle of an excess. Hides for 2 weeks before the police find him and have him charged. Gets out on bail. One of the bail conditions is no driving. Is driving down the road, sees a police car and panics, drives through a roundabout, as in straight line through the middle of it. Of course, the police notice and pull him over, go directly to jail for being dumb. Happened nearly 2 years ago. Wife still hasn't fully recovered, can't walk properly, battled with prescription medicines, which she beat, so proud of her, and still struggles with depression. Story 4. I've got some dark ones, but since everyone else has that side of it covered, I'll send one out that is less messed up. 5 of us took my buddy, let's call him T, out for a bachelor night before his wedding. Pretty much just pub, cigars, and dinner. One guy I didn't know, let's call him J, couldn't stop talking about how much money he makes and how hot Dua Lipa is. So we go to the cigar shop, right? And it's $900 worth of cigars, and we know T doesn't really make a ton of money, so we all pitch in equal amounts except for J. Whatever, I guess Jay doesn't like cigars. Then we go to the pub where Jay doesn't pay again. Getting a little angry at this point, but who cares? It's T's night. So dinner rolls around and Jay keeps talking to the waitress. Let me paint you a picture to you of Jay. He's about 5'5", dress clothes, blundstones, long pea coat with the collar popped and a backwards ball cap that is sitting on the top of his head, with the snapback practically covering his eyebrows. This guy thinks he's the next draft pick for the NHL. So for his last attempt to woo the waitress, he says the bill is together and proceeds to take the machine, puts a 40% tip and pass it on to the left where T pays with his card. I looked at the bill and it was nearly $400. Couldn't stop bragging about how much cash he made, but couldn't even carry his own weight. Wait, hold the phone. He added a huge tip and then passed it off for someone else to pay? Just to impress a waitress? Come on, what a schmuck. Story 5. Not instantly, but in hindsight, I was caught up in the system and things just compounded over the years until a final realization that, well, stuff that guy. A senior workmate took an idea of mine, tried to make their own version of it, presenting it to the bigwigs who assumed I was involved with it. When questions were asked on our side and the validity of my initial ideas put forth, they framed it as a challenge of their team of 5 versus just me. Then eventually they questioned why I was wasting time and resources instead of helping. So I was told to work with their team on their idea, but never allowed me to do anything important on it, despite contributing a lot on other projects before, all the way until he left the project for a promotion and much of his team leaving. Then they had no choice but to give their pile of dung to me to, quote, get ready for production in 6 months, which they had been doing for over a year. Good times. So glad I left. Story 6. My ex-girlfriend was a total witch. We met about 2 years ago and I was questioning being not straight for ages even before then. One day I was relatively nice to her because she looked sad, so that's the person I am. My messages that night were all filled with threats that she'd harm me then herself if I didn't go out with her. I knew this was a major red flag, but I felt like I had to go along with it. After all, how bad could it be? Over the course of a whole year, I was mistreated and had my money ripped from my hands, all while she was messing with other guys on the side. I eventually came out as not straight and ended my relationship with her, but then things got worse. She went to the police and started telling them that I'd been mistreating her for a year, and they actually got involved and were super biased and hostile since I'm a guy and I'm 2 feet taller than her. Eventually, I made my way through it and got away, and I'm never going around in that town again alone for fear that I will hurt her if I see her. I did move away since then, and I'm doing much better almost 2 years later, but I still think about her sometimes and almost break down crying for like no reason. That kind of stuff damages you. A week after breaking up with her, one of her friends started spamming my DMs full of threats and slurs and then blocked me and ridiculed me for not responding. Because blocking people on Skype stops them from being able to message you, but you can message them. Story 7. Does committing food crimes leading to hating someone count? Because for reference, I'm a quite thin guy, but I do love to eat, but thanks to my metabolism, I never gain a lot of weight. I'm also sensitive regarding food as I have a hobby of cooking and know how much effort it takes to make it. If so, I have a story about my first date with my high school sophomore year crush. I had a few more before and after her in high school. So I asked her out to lunch, right, on the upcoming weekend, and we went to a relatively cheap but good cafe. When I went to pick her up, I bought her a Kit Kat as it was my absolute favorite chocolate. She opened it and, without breaking off any of the 4 bars, took a bite from the middle. I was initially blown off, but then I thought that people have their own choices. We went and ordered a large pepperoni pizza with extra cheese and large fries. I ordered a nice coffee, but she didn't order anything. We chatted for a while before the food came and we're having a good time. Soon the food did come and we both took a slice of the pizza. And then this is where I started to feel uncomfortable. She picked up the bottle of ketchup on the table and drizzled so much of it all over the fries. I felt like I lost a heartbeat there with the excess ketchup, but tried to pass it off. Continuing with the food, she took oregano and put so much of it on the slice of pizza that I could no longer see the toppings and cheese. I know it looks exaggerated, but that's actually true and what it looked like. Then she picked the slice up and started eating from the crust end. I was like, what in the world? That's wrong. And I told her about it. And she said, well, that's how she eats it. And I started to lose interest in her right then and there. Somehow, without making eye contact with the pizza or her, I made it through the main course. Now, before I even started drinking my coffee, she asked for a sip, and being polite, I passed the drink to her. She took such a large sip that it almost emptied out half the glass. I again was like, why didn't she order her own if she wanted to drink it? I ordered another coffee for myself to take home and enjoy my own. We split the bill and paid for what we ate. While exiting, she picked up a whole fistful of mints and started to chew them like chewing gum. I just freaked out internally. I dropped her off at her house and said she enjoyed it and would love to go out again, but at this point I had started to hate her just a little bit. But then she asked for a kiss, and being a teenager, the moment I heard kiss, I got super excited. The moment our lips touched, I pulled back due to the intense minty taste and came back to my senses. I said I'd call her and asked the cab driver to rush off. She was actually very nice, but I started to hate her due to my experience with the food. I never called her back, avoided her at school, and when she confronted me, I told her I no longer liked her due to the things she did to the food and ran away, embarrassing myself for the rest of the year, gaining the nickname Food Cop. So yeah, that's how I embarrassed myself in front of a whole class and got to know how conscious about food I was. P.S. I know how exaggerated it sounds, but trust me, I am sensitive to food like Joey Tribbiani and Gordon Ramsay. Story 8. There was a woman checking out a convenience store I went to. I wanted to buy a bag of popcorn, and I waited in line behind this woman for like 3 minutes. I realized she was already checked out. She was just chatting to the checkout lady. She asked if they had matches. The checkout lady said, sure. Then she said, actually, do you have lighters? She was going to have to pay again, and I have to go through this for God knows how long. So I said, hey, mind if I squeeze in there and just check out my popcorn? She turned to me and shouted, Sir, I am gathering my things that I paid for. Thank you and have a good day. And turned away, proceeded to talk for another minute or two as I got more and more annoyed. Checkout girl looked like she didn't know what to do. Not her fault, this lady is dumb. As I finally get to check out, she turns to me at the door of the convenience store as she's leaving. Sir? I ignore her. Sir? I focus intently on the card reader. Sir? I grudgingly make eye contact with her. You are one of the worst customers to have around because you're impatient and rude. Deep breath. All right, miss. Have a good evening. Yeah, you too. I hope you unclench yourself. I hate her more than anyone else in my life right now. Story 9. My dad told me, quote, you don't have feelings when I was like 12. I'm 17 now. So my parents were never really together. They just had me and never got married. My dad got married 3 years after having me. I know this because I'm 3 years older than my sister, and then got divorced a couple years later after he married his current wife. So yeah, when I'm with my mom and people are like, I'm very talkative and I try my best to connect with them, every single person that actually knows me, friends and close family members, can tell you that I'm an extrovert. And I knew I was this way when I was little. I don't really know how or why, but I grew this feeling of detachment from my father and that side of the family to the point where I just played games on my DS when I was with him. I felt really uncomfortable being with him and I had to go there every weekend. So when my father said this, I felt something inside of me laugh and cry at the same time. It was a quote, you have no idea how I am, you don't even know me at all kind of moment. After that, I've held a grudge against my dad that I've tried to overcome for years because he isn't a bad person and he does really try his best, but I still feel this unconscious hate and dislike towards him. I guess this is one example of people can try being their best and it's still not good enough. To her, I guess her father was just not a good enough dad. Story 10. I work in student accommodation and occasionally I need to host kitchen meetings and help students understand our expectations and if they require any assistance. So one of the students who lives here for free asked us to host a kitchen meeting because one tenant did not pull weight in bins removal. After the meeting, I spoke with the student who lives here for free and spoke about students in quarantine. I said the students who tested positive can use the kitchen but should be discouraged and ask for assistance. The freeloader said they are prohibited from using the kitchen. Anyways, I go back to my office and read the email students received after testing positive, and nowhere does it say the student is prohibited from using the kitchen. Freeloader calls me twice during the same night and waffles on the same issue. The following day, I received an email from the university and saying I got a complaint. That student had the audacity to complain about me. Later on, yesterday, her kitchen, quote, won a free kitchen cleaning as a Christmas initiative from cleaners. The cleaning ladies asked me to take pictures because they know this student will look for things to complain about. Fast forward to the evening, the freeloader complains the kitchen is not clean enough. That one entitled student is so out of touch with reality, nobody will tell her because she will run and make another complaint. She burned her bridges with all the staff and even the university knows she's difficult. Story 11. My dad passed away and when I offered to pay for the mortgage on the house that's in his and my name so my stepmother could continue to live there, and I wouldn't lose the house in a foreclosure if she couldn't pay. Deed is joint tenancy with right of survivorship that was done before I could legally obtain a mortgage. She kicked me out, quit speaking to me, and didn't even let me have so much as a photograph. Told others I was trying to make her homeless. I couldn't have kicked her out if I wanted to based on laws in her state for one, and she doesn't work, so I wanted to make sure the house was being paid for. She wouldn't let me buy my dad's motorcycle or his truck. She planned his memorials and didn't include me or invite me to the one I was closer to. I live in a different state. I was closing on a house the day of the one she invited me to and couldn't go. She didn't allow photography or filming so I could see later. She changed his obituary and gushed about how she was the love of his life. He asked her for a divorce 3 months before he died because they hated each other. Told me she was his sole beneficiary even though I didn't ask her for a single penny. I paid for his funeral expenses even though she had his life insurance. She allowed his work to put together a GoFundMe and raise $10K for these expenses, and then kept it all and never told anyone about it. I found out from his boss after the fact. My dad will be interred at Arlington, so apart from cremation expenses and the urn, there are no interment fees. I paid for the transport there and the urn and everything. Then she went behind my back and sent a letter from Santa to my kids to try and circumvent me. She hasn't spoken to me since the day after my dad died, except to send me the 10-day notice of my dad's memorial out of state. The part that instantly made me hate her, though, was making me go back to the hospital to get his things. I had just held his hand while he passed away and made the call on pulling the plug. I had FaceTimed her to let her say goodbye. I was devastated, and I had grabbed most of his things, and I guess the staff had left his wedding ring on the table. They offered to mail it. She demanded I go back and get it. It just about broke me. And then she snatched it and wouldn't allow me anything from my own childhood. Still not 5 months later, she's a selfish, miserable witch. Story 12. Out for a walk, saw a stray cat, and just as I was about to go say hi to the cat, some random kid hurled something at it. At that point, I lost it. I honestly like cats more than some people. Give chase to the little kid who freaks out and runs and runs and runs until he runs indoors. Turns out his dad is just as big of a sack as the kid. So after I storm off and he laughs his head standing there in his shorts. However, I took note of his POS's car's license plate and expired tax disc and called the coppers when I saw it again outside the local pub. I also saw him harm his kid like it was nothing and called child protection on them. The dad got a DUI and his car towed. The kid went into a home, I think. Although honestly, with his parents, that's doing him a favor. The cat was okay. I saw her again a few days later and got her into a shelter and then a forever home. Story 13. Complained that his ex-girlfriend called the cops on him for mistreating her. Or maybe it was when he, a newbie temp, called me and my coworker liars and claimed we weren't working, which we were because he was mad that we didn't let him do a job where we couldn't keep an eye on him. Or maybe it was when he came in under the influence and took off at lunch without telling anyone. We were slammed with work. I low-key actually don't mind that he left all that much. One of these things came first, but I don't remember which one. It's been a while. But it could also be none of these, and it could also have been something more shallow, like the fact he drove a rusting station wagon with a too long couch perpetually hanging out the back, coupled with the fact he looked like a Cabbage Patch baby with a leprechaun beard. Saw him at Walmart the other day. He was looking very miserable. Story 14. My sister's ex, who I unfortunately still work with, gave me a job in nursing recruitment about a year and a half ago when they were still together. I was honestly just looking for a job since I failed my comp sci uni course and was still depressed knowing what future prospects I lost. Back in September, I found out they broke up. My sister refused to tell me what happened. All I knew initially was that she was very heartbroken about it and cried for about a week. Then a month later in October, which is when our birthdays were, I found out that the schmuck cheated on my sister by paying for intimacy. Not once, but like multiple times. And my sister even forgave him the first time she found out. She had a bunch of photos for proof, but only wanted to show me the text messages exchanged, which was enough for me. When I first met the guy, I thought he was a bit arrogant with a salesperson's alpha male complex, but I tolerated it because my sister was somewhat happy. Now I can't see him other than the piece of garbage he is now, who has multiple complaints against him from the women in the office, and the director doesn't want to get rid of him because he gets results. Bear in mind, no one in the office knows about his hobbies, because my sister doesn't want me to say anything and be the better man. And him being the operations manager, and now also makes sense why the majority of the people hired are women. The job isn't even great since it's long hours from 7:30 in the morning to 5 o'clock in the afternoon and pays barely above minimum wage. Now I'm just biding my time until I can leave to get another job with somewhat better conditions or pay someone to like he usually does. If you're feeling any of these stories in this video, please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 15. My mom has drinking problems, has been for over a decade. As you can imagine, she's pulled a lot of stuff on me, but the thing that flipped me immediately from being exasperated and disgusted to outright hate was when I found out she drinks and drives. I don't know if she still does it as much, but back then she did it almost every day. My dad knew. When I asked why the hell he put up with it, he shrugged and said she had to go to work. My mom then worked a job that you should absolutely not be hammered at. Think being in charge of people's lives. Thankfully, she quit before I had to report her to her own boss, but this just compounded my anger. I couldn't believe she did it so flippantly and that my father knew. She had told him to keep quiet about it because she was frightened of my reaction. Of course, I reamed her out. Once I caught her in the act and I called the police on her, unfortunately, she was still technically under the limit, but she still got put in a police car and taken to the station to be processed and checked. For a while, it seemed to scare her straight, and then one day I was visiting. She pointed out a huge hole in the neighbor's hedge and laughed while telling us that she did it trying to steer the car while intoxicated. I can only hope that when she inevitably wipes out, she only ends or maims herself and not some other innocent motorist. Story 16. From the beginning of my sixth grade, my teacher would constantly pick on me and provoke me all the way to ninth grade. That's not what got me upset, though. The part that made me hate them instantly was when they tried to have me arrested. My mother is a politician, so the teacher, let's call her Miss B, realized that if I lashed out, any and all my behavior would be pinned on my mother's name. She got me to have a detention every day for a year during lunch and break, and even on the days when I had music practice with the teacher. She wanted me to come to the room and sit for the 10 to 15-minute period before practice started. Every small incident or inconvenience would lead to me getting suspended because she just so happened to be the principal's cousin. I'd finally had enough when I was in middle school or so, 2 years after she started pestering me and had gotten mine and my mother's name into the local newspaper a few times, and I lashed out. I said, if the school was ever to have an accident, I'm sure Miss B would be the first one to end. And of course, the teacher's pet was just excited to relay what I said to her. She then said that she was fearful for her life and filed 2 police reports on me. At that exact moment when I had to go to the station to talk to the police, I wanted to end that woman because she already ruined any chance of me getting the tech job I wanted in Japan, which was my only goal and dream, or any other real job. She was also trying to press the papers to get me arrested about a week after she filed it. After the whole ordeal, I found out that the 2 current students as well as a past student had to get restraining orders on her because she would not leave them alone. And to this day, I still won't mind getting charged with crimes for hurting her. Like, looking back on it, she's like 40 or 50-something-year-old woman who was picking on a kid. That's like super messed up, bro. Story 17. My best friend was like a brother to me. He was very cool, would say the funniest things, and had the coolest plans. I was younger to him by a year and basically was his minion growing up. However, when I became a teenager, my immediate surroundings expanded from just my school and home. I began to see he was not quite pleased with me taking on new projects or making new friends. Often he would ridicule me with names and insults, some of which were very demeaning, but he would also do so very well and disguise it as humor, which he and the other boys would laugh off, and my naive mind, though uncomfortable, would laugh along with them just to get along. However, this one time, my landlord, who was a young man in his mid-20s, showed me his new car speaker, which was like 40K INR. That's close to about 500 USD. I was excited and showed my best friend the speaker when the landlord was away. It was a really cool speaker and resembled a jet engine. The landlord left the speaker in a small shed beside our house for a few days as he had somewhere to be. The next day, the speaker was missing. I assumed the landlord must have taken it back with him. My best friend was missing as well. He'd ghosted me. One day, a friend of mine who had resentment towards my best friend came and said he had something to tell me. Apparently, he overheard my best friend brag about a 40K speaker to someone else, and putting 2 and 2 together, he came and told him. I wouldn't usually believe him as my personality was built to be a loyal person. However, with all the ghosting and the excuses to not hang out he had been making, I decided what harm could one query bring. This dude didn't even flinch nor even make an attempt to lie. He just openly accepted that he took the speaker in the early morning the next day, and I was stunned. I demanded to have it brought back, but instead, this dude gaslit me in reverse for not understanding his situation and how he has already sold it to someone and taking it back would do poorly in his image. I lost my mind. I demanded that he bring it back. Things didn't work out for both of us the following day. He got involved, bragging and talking dirt against someone, and they wrecked him. Due to circumstances, I had to rescue him out of it, and in the scuffle, the landlord's car, which was parked nearby, was damaged, and the news of the theft was brought up as well. I was placed on trial by the community as an accomplice. Fortunately, the guy who bought the speaker turned out to be an old school friend of my sister, and he agreed to have it returned and deal with the thief separately without dragging me and my family into it. This occurred a long time ago, however. I still have not received one single apology. I like to sleep soundly at night, and as such, I'm very forgiving sometimes, which more often gets me the short end of the stick, but it's usually with things I can live with. I make very careful decisions now in life, with people and anything else, and manage to pull myself from being almost thrown out of the community to becoming respected as a lawyer now. However, my ex-best friend still maintains his high horse and hasn't apologized even once, and he is the only person I have never forgiven. I say better late than never to recognize the snakes in your life. Story 18. I work in emergency services, and last night 3 intoxicated guys came to the station saying one of them had been bitten by a dog. You can guess the breed. I say, come in and take a seat on the exam bed. It's a dog bite, all right. I'm telling them that we can put a bandage on and call an ambulance. No, they don't want an ambo. Fine, just go to the clinic tomorrow for medicines and I'll bandage it now. Then my black colleague comes to assist and repeats what I said about the clinic because it's important. Then the one guy who wasn't bitten starts slurring some stuff about 2 politicians, also black people. I'd finished with the bandage at this point and told them that's enough, leave the political stuff and get out of here, fine. So they help their buddy limp to the gate, I get the remote to open it, then I hear that same intoxicated guy shouting profanity while the gate is rolling open. I was about to do the paperwork, so I got up and walked out there. As I get there, this guy utters words I won't repeat, called my colleague the local equivalent of the N-word. He wasn't coming towards my colleague or anything, just standing on the other side of the closing gate hurling profanities, so I couldn't turn to fight back. I told him what I thought of his behavior, hoping he could attempt to come back in. So we stood there, swearing at each other for a couple of seconds. He just shrugged, laughed, and walked off. I genuinely hate that guy. Story 19. Just happened. I had feelings for a close, long-time friend of mine. They didn't, and we didn't message for about 2 weeks. After those 2 weeks, they messaged asking if I was over them, and were adamant that I need to get over them so we could resume our close friendship. I asked for time and space, and we stopped talking. Last month, out of guilt of pushing away someone that may have considered me close and not wanting to end up in a situation where they passed away, and I would have to live with the guilt of knowing I maybe could have done something, I messaged them and told them if they needed anything, I would still be there for them. Fast forward to yesterday/today when they asked again if I was over them and reiterated how I was a huge part of their life, missed talking to me and were wondering whether we'd ever talk again. After I reiterated that I'd only be there if they needed help with something, they revealed that they were diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and OCD last year, and are effectively trying to guilt trip me into being friends again because I, quote, wouldn't want to add to their growing list of mental issues. Like, yeah, that probably would do the trick, would also make me not want to be friends with someone emotionally manipulative either. Story 20. I used to be a security guard. My last post commander on my very first day at that post during the first 5 minutes goes on to say some pretty prejudiced stuff. I think he felt safe saying it because we're both from the same background, but ever since then, I didn't like him. The hate just kept growing because he kept saying and doing foul things. We eventually organized and reported him to the company we worked for, and they investigated. 6 different people all gave reports and even were interviewed by HR, all for the company to say that they found nothing wrong and that he was innocent. If you ever think about becoming a security guard, don't work for Allied Universal. For some reason, they live in the opposite world. They reward their bad employees while they punish those who actually do their job. I was there for 8 years, and while I was coasting most of the time, I did see a lot of dumb things that they did and got away with. I'm just lucky I found a new job and got out of there. Story 21. FWB called me selfish when I was sad and mourning the passing of my Jack Russell Terrier. As with any passing, taking time to mourn and being sad is to be expected, I would assume. I thought that was just a universal thing that everyone usually did and understood. Not this guy, though. He legit went on an hour-long tirade about how selfish I was, mad that I was taking a while to get back to his tasks, and accused me of over-exaggerating my sadness. I pleaded with him to understand. I tried to recount how things were going with my pup for the time I knew him. My dog was falling apart those last few months, and I shared all of that with him as it was transpiring. I've never felt so insulted and disrespected in my entire life. Instead of being someone to help me, he harmed me while I was down, and that really hurt. I was so confused about why he was so angry with me. He has a chihuahua, for Christ's sake. Milo was the light of my life, the spark of my life in my eyes, my only constant in those 15, almost 16 years. I'm still very lost without him, and now I hate that when I get sad thinking about my pup, that grief is now tied to the anger I have felt with my former FWB. I do not hate, ever. I feel that someone has to go completely out of their way for me to write them off. But I hate this guy so much there's just nothing he could ever do to redeem himself. And I hope that he lives a very long and lonely life with the worst luck that any human being could possibly ever have. Story 22. I had a Tinder date with a girl who lived across the street from me, so I proposed we went downstairs to an awesome Mexican restaurant that I frequented where she had never been. Things were messed up right from the start. She fell down a 2-step stair and called her lawyer mom, who told her to take videos and threatened to sue if they don't take care of her. The stairway was not illuminated, apparently illegal or something. After 2 drinks, she was mistreating me, so I told her I'm tired and going home. I tried to pay, and she said no to the restaurant will pay. This started a whole scene inside with her yelling at the staff while I apologized. At this point, I just wanted to keep a good reputation because it was my favorite restaurant in town, so while she yelled and argued with the boss, I talked to the waitress at our table and told her the story, left a great tip, and went out the door before the date was noticed. They made fun of me, playfully, for a year or so until I moved out. 4 years later, I brought my now fiance to the Mexican place I've been talking about. When we walked out after my 100th perfect meal there, the owner told my girl to watch the step. I laughed. She didn't get it. Story 23. My aunt said she thinks that because my grandfather appears to be coping well after my grandmother's passing, that he never liked her. My grandmother passed away in 2018. She got cancer and in the space of 2 weeks went from diagnosis to passing. She was one of the most selfless people I knew and was always volunteering, including as a hospice companion because she knew it was something not many people would or could do. She used to be a school volleyball coach, and as a testament to her impact, some of her former students flew cross country to visit her in the hospital when they heard. She was, by all accounts, a wonderful person. My grandfather adored her from the day they met. When she passed away, it was like a huge chunk of him had been ripped apart. It's still hard for him, but he has picked up some of the volunteer work she did that he is capable of. He is legally blind now, has some significant hearing loss, and has mobility challenges because he sees it as a way to honor her and stay close to her. I lived with my grandmother for a year in 2019 and 2020, which was supposed to be a month or two after moving back from working abroad. While I got things sorted, but he ended up in the hospital with eye issues. Several surgeries, but only some vision is left in one eye and it's very degraded. So I put my job search on hold to take care of him, and then 2020 happened, which extended my time. So I got to spend a lot of time with him and we became very close. I would drive him to the cemetery regularly so he could leave flowers, and he would always leave in tears. He would talk a lot about her, how much they loved each other and all the great times they had. Despite how hard it is for my grandfather, he's a stiff upper lip kind of guy and he is happiest when surrounded by family. So from the outside, most people think he's handled it very well, but he still talks about her a lot, keeps the house the way she did, volunteers and donates to causes that were important to her, keeps in touch with her extended family, and so on. It's not hard to see how important she was to him. My aunt, by marriage to my uncle, has always been super competitive, and her family are all doctors, so they look down on my family, mostly teachers and artists. And I think she has always resented how my grandmother would be applauded for her charitable acts, despite my grandmother being very humble and not wanting acclaim. My aunt and uncle live somewhat close to my grandfather but are separated by a ferry, so they only visit when necessary or when they have to go to the city for something and want to stay overnight at his house. A few months ago, my aunt told my stepmom, quote, that she would never say this to any of the family, but because my grandfather seems to be doing so well and seems happy that he must have never really liked her after all, and now he's truly free. My stepmom, who also helped my grandfather a lot as she and my dad lived close to him, was furious and in disbelief. When I heard this, I immediately hated my aunt. Admittedly, I've always been suspicious of her and found her obnoxious due to the superiority complex. But this was just over the edge, not just because she felt like she could tell my stepmom, because she doesn't see her as part of the family, but because of how untrue and oblivious the statement is. Story 24. My mom invited a biological niece of hers and her husband to Thanksgiving one year. Mom is adopted, so she has a bio family she's just getting to know. At dinner, the conversation drifted to eating out at restaurants. I mentioned that I used to work as a server, and because of that, I try to always leave a tip because I know that servers work hard. Immediately, cousin's husband starts going off about, oh no, they don't. I hate when they aren't there to refill my glass right away, and I won't leave a tip if they don't do a good job, blah, 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 blah. Then the cousin starts talking about how her dad used to do that thing where they lay 5 ones out on the table and start yanking them away if the waitress isn't up to standards. You could tell they thought it was brilliant. Then he started talking about how his sister's husband is a typical Mexican who was lazy, etc. As soon as they left, I told my mother I couldn't stand them. I told her they were prejudiced, right-wing schmucks. She tried to make excuses for them, but I told her they were bad people, and over the next year or so, they proved to be overt, prejudiced, and just all around stupid in the worst ways. Story 25. An ex-friend of mine used my dad's passing as her own personal clout. About a week after I had graduated 8th grade, my dad very suddenly passed away, which was extremely devastating for my life and family's life. He was a great man. I had been friends with a girl throughout elementary, but once junior high came around, I noticed her stupid thing of needing attention all the time and putting others down. So we weren't not too close at this point of my father's passing. Come the day of my dad's celebration of life, this quote unquote friend pulled up to the celebration with another person, showing that she had a sleepover and also taking cute photos in her outfit beforehand and posted them on social media. Once she got there, she had brought her own personal support crew of girls from my class that had always been rude and fake to me. So that was irritating, but not the worst. When people were giving speeches about my dad, my cousin, who had lost his mom previously, came by my side and had his arm around me for support. The said quote unquote friend comes over and proceeds to push my cousin out of the way and starts sobbing on my shoulder and making a scene for me to comfort her. She wasn't close with my dad at all in the first place, as these speeches are still going. I was infuriated at that moment, but couldn't put my focus on that at the moment, though. Days later, I found my dad's passing date in her IG bio, and she never apologized or anything. I hate people who try to take advantage on others' grief for clout and attention and sympathy for themselves only. I have completely erased this person from my life and have never regretted it for a second. Story 26. Found my spare key outside and came into the house hours before we were going to hang out and ate dinner in the dining room while I was intimate with my girlfriend. We're talking minutes after getting home from work. Gave me grief about his fears for weeks before finally deciding when we carpooled on a business trip that I didn't need to worry about my mask. Turns out he visited family on Mother's Day and may have contracted one. Girlfriend and I cancel all our doctor's appointments and a surgery for her before he tells us the quick test was negative, i.e., he never mentioned he was getting tested when he texted me. A girl he asked out at work lied to him about why she wasn't available for a date and proceeded to conscript coworkers to feel her out about why she lied. Then later on decided to theologically debate her on her religiously restrictive diet while basically just accusing her religion of being wrong. Just found out recently he's jealous I was dating this girl, we're married now, before he could because he saw her first, and I'm just a beta male, according to what he was telling coworkers I don't know. He's almost 5 years younger than me and I'm younger than her, and his track record with women suggests he's very controlling. And in case anyone is wondering, this is all the same person. I have progressively been less friendly with him each time. The wife actively avoids talking to him now. Forgot to mention that I met them both in college, but they never met each other until we all started working at the same place. She and I clicked at work, but not college. And if you liked any of these stories, here's more for you because YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video, and thanks for hanging with me on this one.